the question that came up kind of post-election was like, does anyone care about celebrities? Because it seems like there are people that want you to hear the voice of celebrities, and
which they're so important.
because even I mean, Harrison Ford did it, and that's okay because he's Harrison Ford. But everyone else, you got like you normally get for these things, like a parade of, these shocking revelations that this.
That Taylor Swift threw her weight behind the Harris campaign.
Was there anyone on the face of this earth that I wasn't sure about how any of the endorsements would go? Like, I mean, for both sides, but
yeah,
I mean, like there is sort of a predictability for it. But it did seem like, especially like the last couple of weeks before the election, like it was like constant. And just this celebrity, here's a video, here's them at a concert, here's this person, and like very much it just seemed like the rich and famous have. They've come down from the mountaintop and they've let us know,
how we should vote.
How we should vote. And obviously, if you know the results of the election, it didn't work out that way. And kind of the thing that we can kind of base our conversation on is I came across two kind of interesting and related articles in the Hollywood Reporter. One of them was titled, "All Those A-List Celebs Couldn't Save Harris, but Joe Rogan helped Trump." And then the other article, which I think was published like the same day, was titled, "How Trump Won the First Influencer Election." And it's just an interesting conversation, I think, because it very much kind of raises the question of like who has cultural power now to influence people. Is it sort of the old guard of like the old mindset of the rich and famous, that people care what the Hollywood actors want to say or the pop stars, or like have things shifted and that we're sort of in like a new kind of a new terrain? But several things to get into for that. But what are some of your initial thoughts on, like, did you notice some of this play out?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think if just sort of in the world at all, I think in the past 10 years, I think most people realize that sort of the old way of media and I think maybe even celebrity endorsements and sort of what celebrities have to say and just this sort of this overall feeling, I think, of like it's actually a little bit cringe when celebrities sort of like issue these edicts from their various homes about how we the people should think and feel about something. That I think there's some growing resentment towards that for sure, but also that just the media landscape has, I feel like after this election, I don't think anyone is in doubt that the media landscape has shifted towards sort of this new media landscape of more individual players in both in like news, but also just in media in general, as podcasts have just sort of exploded in popularity. Seems like everybody has a podcast. We're talking about this on a podcast, so the irony is not lost on me. But I think it's just very clear at this point how important those new forms of media are. I mean, they're not that new, but compared to like legacy media, it certainly is. And I think you can't, like, you ignore that at your peril, as like the Harris campaign discovered.
Yeah, and I think there's a sense of like, go ask someone on the street, especially maybe an older person, like name 10 Hollywood celebrities. That's going to be pretty easy. Ask them to name, 10, TikTok influencers or podcasters. Probably be a bit more challenging. Like there is, I think, because sort of the more old school, like just the celebrity, the rich and famous, they get so much more airtime and like they're more recognizable that we assume that like, well, they're the sort of, they have this many followers on Twitter or something. Like, therefore, they're really the ones, shaping, the opinions of people. And I will say, I do want to address first, and then we'll get into some of that. But like, just the idea of like, is it wrong for them, celebrities, to speak out? Because you hear that all the time of like, why would they do that? Like, why, kind of that, stay in their lane. And like, I personally just like, I find, like you said, there's some cringy aspects to it, but like, they're American citizens, and I feel like there are a lot of other people that aren't in politics that are speaking out on issues.
Yeah.
Some of them are, even on the platform of both parties. Like, I don't think that's wrong. And I do think there is a degree of double standards of like, we get annoyed by it, but what we're really annoyed by is not that they're speaking out; it's that they're not speaking out for our stuff. Like, because then when another one does that's more aligned with what we believe or whatever, it's like, oh, well, that's great. Glad to have those people standing for truth in Hollywood or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I thought we didn't like this. Like, I thought we didn't want them speaking out at all. It's like, well, we just don't want them speaking out. So I do think that, hey, whatever. If they want to speak out, they can speak out. But I think it is a very valid question of, like, does anyone listen? And it seems like they don't. And I do think, like, especially if you've been following this pop culture trends and stuff for the last, 10, 15 years, it probably shouldn't be a surprise that, like, celebrities don't actually, like, have much influence as far as, like, shifting political policy, or most of the candidates that the big name celebrity, like Taylor Swift, has supported to have tended to lose. Like, it's they definitely have cultural influence, but as far as, like, in more the field of, like, politics or some of those areas, I think there's almost been like an inverse as far as it goes with, like, celebrities, that, like, the more access we've got to them, like, through technology, and like the mystique has been lost, that, like, the less, like, we might still follow them more and be like, we know more of what they do day to day, but I think for the most part, we care less about their actual opinions. And you can see that with like award shows. Like, no one watches those anymore. Like, they're all tanking, struggling, because no one wants to hear these celebrities stand on the stage and deliver these lectures to the audience about different social policies or whatever, or even just the idea of, like, leading men or women in Hollywood. Like, I know people talk about, like, Tom Cruise is, like, kind of the last Hollywood leading man. Like, he's about the only guy still going that I'm gonna go to the movie because Tom Cruise is in it and he's the man. Like, like, there's very few actors, and you even see that, like, all the guys that were, like, in Marvel and stuff. Like, you can sell the Marvel movie, or at least you could, but any of them that kind of go solo, and, like, that audience doesn't go with them. Like, the allegiance is more to, like, the property, not to the person. Like, Chris Hemsworth can't seem to make a successful movie unless he's doing Thor, like, unless he's doing in and even, like, just, like, anecdotally, I know, like, I was talking to my wife about a movie about a couple weeks ago, when she was asking if I was going to go do a review for The Collision. And I was like, nah, like, there's a bunch of other big movies and stuff, and I just don't think there's enough interest in it. So, like, I don't have time. And she's like, are you sure? Like, I've seen it everywhere. Like, these, because I had two very young, popular, like, celebrities. And it's like, they've been doing all the award shows, they've been doing all these interviews, like they've been getting so much airtime because of who they are, that the assumption was that people are going to care about this movie, and they didn't, because it wasn't an interesting movie. Like, people were into, like, the gossip aspect of it, but I just feel like the more you sort of kind of whatever, like, evaluate, kind of see the trends of just celebrity culture, it becomes almost predictable that, like, like, despite all the headlines and, like, the polished videos that they're making to endorse candidates, I don't think they're, if they ever were, like, the actual sources of power or, like, influence in our culture. And I think that has shifted more towards, like, the influencer culture or podcasts. And what are some, like, why do you think that is? Like, why has that shift taken place?
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's lots of reasons. I mean, I think one that just comes to mind is, I think there's a degree, at least, of perceived authenticity with the more, let's say, influencer class of celebrity. Although many of them may not be, like, household names, but I think there's just, like, a degree of intimacy, I think, and kinship with people that are, like, speaking direct to camera and have at least somewhat of a dialogue with their audience. And I think, and especially if it's over, like, a long period of time, like, you've been following a certain person for years, and, like, so you develop at least a degree of trust, and at least assuming they're honest, like, where they're kind of coming from. So when they do talk about something that's political or what have you, you can at least evaluate that based on what you know about them as a person. And I think that does translate into, like, a greater degree of trust when it comes to more political things, because there's at least, I'm sure you can fabricate a lot of this, but, like, there's at least this sense of, like, I'm getting the real whoever, name your influencer. And when it's just, one-off TikTok videos from Gail Godot or Taylor Swift or whatever saying, you should go vote for this person or that person, then I think like it's just, it doesn't, I don't think carry the weight, because it's like, well, this is just some celebrity telling me what I need to do, and they haven't really earned the right to kind of have that conversation with you in a sense.
And I think it puts the emphasis on them. Like
Yeah.
most of those come across very much of like, this is my duty to sort of showcase that I'm on the right side of history. And
I'm George Clooney and I know best.
Very much sort of this is about, me taking this stand, and it's even just the way that they're done is very much like, the emphasis is on like, look at me fighting for the right thing. And I think sort of like, to me, the big difference between like the old school sort of celebrity videos, endorsements, and more the like Joe Rogan type, or obviously he's the big guy.
Yeah.
The smaller level sort of influencers and stuff. Is this the difference between like talking to and talking with? Like the celebrity endorsements are very much talking to. Like I'm the rich, famous, successful person. I'm looking at the camera, you're looking at me, and I'm going to tell you what you need to do. Where like a podcast or like an influencer, like most of that comes out through, even if it's not a conversation with you directly, it's a conversation between people.
Right.
It's longer form. There's a back and forth. Like there's a dialogue to it. There's a greater sense of like, this is a conversation we're having. You're invited into this, and we can kind of work through this. And I think the more you know, I think that appeals to everyone.
Yeah.
But like the more you know about, like even just Gen Z, like that culture, you can see why that would speak their language more than just sort of some distant person wagging a finger at them and telling them what they need to do, or they're that person. Like that more like personality driven, dialogue driven, like personal connection, even if it is somewhat artificial in a digital world. Like this, you can see why that speaks the language way more. And I feel like it's only going to keep slanting that way. Like I don't think it's going to suddenly slant back to like, well, but what do the celebrities say? Like I think this is sort of the future. And I think even this.
Well, I think that that train is going to leave the station, and I don't think it's going to be coming back. As far as like us going back to, I want to know what those far off celebrities think of how I should vote. Like I don't think anybody's going back to that.
Yeah, which is not to say that they don't have influence, and like Taylor Swift, like in the entertainment industry. Like,
she
has a lot of sway.
Right, and I think that's the interesting thing. It's like there are people who have massive followings that can mobilize them to do certain things, but I think like that doesn't always translate into you can now, come follow me as we all get behind this political candidate. That I think is way harder and way more complex than just like, hey, let's all cheer on whoever the Kansas City Chiefs, or you know what I mean? Like it's way less consequential, I think, for one, but it's just much harder to translate like, hey, you all loved me in this movie, now let's go vote for your future. It's like, well, that's a bigger ask than just like, hey, let's all go to the movies and, watch this movie, or let's all buy this toy, or whatever it may be that they're sort of advocating for. I think when it moves into the political realm, I think it's just, there's a much higher bar that people, I think, automatically have or just intuitively have when it's, some celebrity telling them.
Yeah, and I do think there'll be sort of a reckoning for just like an evaluation after the fact, trying to figure out like, within Hollywood and just like Christians and stuff, like who has the power. And I think as Christians, it should direct us, change our view a little bit as far as like, maybe don't get so worked up that this pop star made the most predictable political endorsement in the history of the world. And like, and assume that that's really, well, if she said it, then Gen Z is gone because they're going to vote for whatever, or believe, or this, support this, as opposed to going deeper to sort of more, what seems to be the growing and already the more influential of like, conversations and podcasts.